Last class, we have been started up our discussion talking about constructors. Constructors. I said to you what is a constructor, what is the use of a constructor, what is a constructor, how to define a constructor. Okay? And constructors can be defined either explicitly or implicitly. But calling must be done explicitly. Defining can be explicit or implicit, but calling must be explicit. And second important thing what I said to you, if you don't define a constructor, compiler will define a constructor. What constructor? Default constructor. Don't forget this. Compiler will never define your parameterized constructor. Compilers will always define your default constructors only. Yeah, compilers will always define your default constructors. A compiler will never define your parameterized constructors at all. Every constructor that is defined by a compiler is always going to be a default constructor. Never you have a parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor should be defined by programmers only. Okay? And next important point, what is it? If a constructor is parameterized, values to the parameters should be sent while creating the instance. See, we are passing the values here. Param con demo, and we are passing the value. Are you clear? So these are the things what I explained for you already. Two programs I already explained you. One is con demo and one is param con demo. Today, okay guys, today let us talk about this one. What is the need of defining a constructor in our code? So today, let's talk about what is the need of defining a constructor in my code. What do you mean by that? Actually, if you don't define a constructor in your class, you will have an implicit constructor. If you don't define a constructor in your class, you'll have a implicit constructor, yes or not? There is an implicit constructor defined in your class. No constructor in the class, no issue. Implicit constructors are available. Implicit constructors are available using which I can create the instance. For creating an instance, constructor is mandatory or optional? For creating an instance, constructor is mandatory or optional? Mandatory. Okay, constructor is mandatory. If I don't define a constructor, do I have an implicit constructor or not? If I don't define a constructor, do I have an implicit constructor or not? Constructor is mandatory. Anyhow, we have implicit constructor. Constructor is mandatory, guys. Anyhow, we have a implicit constructor. Now the question will be, what is the need of defining a constructor explicitly again? Did you understand my question? Tell me, constructor is mandatory here. If you don't define a constructor, what is there? Implicit constructor is there. Are you clearer or not? If there is an implicit constructor available, what is the need of defining a constructor again? Why should I define a constructor explicitly? Why should I define a constructor explicitly? Did you catch my point, all of you? Yes or not? What is the need of defining a constructor explicitly again? Okay, let me answer this question. What is the need of defining a constructor explicitly again when we have implicit constructors in place? Okay, we'll talk about that today. Actually, guys, constructors are for initializing the fields of a class. Already said you this point now. Implicit constructors have a drawback. Implicit constructors have a drawback. What is the drawback? That is, they will initialize the fields of a class either with the default value of the type or a given or a fixed given value even if we create multiple instances of the class. So what is that? Listen carefully. Implicit constructor can initialize the fields for you, no doubt. Implicit constructors can initialize the fields for you, no doubt. But what is the problem, They will initialize your fields either with a fixed given value, or default value of the type. Even I create multiple instances of the class. What do you mean by that? Look at this, all of you. In my project, I'm defining a new class. Notice it, all of you. In my project, I'm defining a new class. We'll name the class as second.cs. Second.cs. Now, in this class, I will define you a public field, public int x. That's it. Remember, yesterday or day before yesterday, we defined a class called first. Yesterday or day before yesterday, we defined a class called first. Here also we declared a public field x. Let's open that code once. Yeah. Here also you see, you declared one public field x, but initialized with the value 100. Here you have a public field x, but did not initialize with any value. Got it? Now in both these two classes, did I define a constructor? In both these two classes, did I define a constructor? No, we did not define a constructor in the first class, or we did not define a constructor in the second class also. So both of them will have an implicit constructor only. Both of them are going to have implicit constructor. Are you clear? Now, let me take another class here. We'll name it as test classes. Test classes. In test classes, can I create the instance of the class first? Open the mouth and answer faster. Can I create the instance of the class first? Already we learned about it. You can create the instance of a class in another class. So, first f1 is equals to new first. Same way, I'm going to create one more instance and one more instance. How many instances are created? 3 instances. Same way, I also want to create the instance of the second class also. Second, S1 is equals to new second, S2 is equals to new second, and second, S3 is equals to new second. So how many instances you created per class first? 3 instances. Here, 3. In both these two classes, you have a field extra? Yes or not? Now both of them have an implicit constructor only. Both of them have a implicit constructor. An implicit constructor is a default constructor. Implicit constructor is a default constructor. What it does, when you create 3 instances of the class first, you have 3 copies of x. When you create 3 instances of the class second, you have 3 copies of x. Correct? Yes or not? Now understand, guys, what is the drawback of the implicit constructor? Read this point. Did not understand? How many instances I created for each class? 3 instances. Now, all of you, concentrate on this. Console.writeLine f1.x .x. F3 dot X. I was printing you all the three. Same way, let me print you S1 dot X, S2 dot X, S3 dot X. Console dot. You notice this, guys, now. What is the value? What is the value? 0. Read again. Till you did not understand? Even you could have multiplied the same copy coming now. In the first case, what is coming 100? Why? There is a given value. Second case, what is coming 0? Why? Default value. Are you clear? So what is the drawback now, sir? What is the drawback is, so your father has given you a permission to purchase 3 new dresses. Your father has given you a permission to purchase 3 new dresses. He has given your card to you. He has given your card to you and said, go and purchase 3 new dresses. Are you going to purchase all the 3 dresses of the same color? Will you purchase the same color, same pattern now? Yes or not? That is foolish. Why? If you have a chance to purchase 3 dresses means you try to go for 3 different colors and 3 different patterns. You don't take 3 colors of the same pant and same shirt or the same dress. You're not purchasing a uniform now. Yes or not? So you wear the 3 new dresses 3 days continuously also. Your friends will ask you a question, why are you wearing the same dress? But you know these are 3 new dresses. But everyone will think that is same only now. Got the point or not? Okay? So understand here the big foolishness. What is that? You are initializing the fields either with a fixed given value. What is that? 100 in the first case. Second case, there is no value. That's a default value. Even if I create multiple instances of the class, even if I create multiple instances of the class. Did you understand my point or not? But understand yourself here. What is the need of creating multiple instances with same value? What is the need of creating multiple instances with same value? If I create multiple instances, if each instance is going to have a different value, that makes sense. But if all instances are going to have the same value, does it make sense at all? That is foolish now. 3 instances all having the same values here. Is it clearer or not? Okay, this is the drawback of implicit constructors. This is the drawback of implicit constructors. Okay, to overcome the above problem, we define constructors explicitly in our code. What type of constructors? Parameterized. We define constructors explicitly in our code. What type of constructors? Parameterized. And then send new values to the fields for each instance we create. Did you understand my point or not? How to overcome the problem? We need to define what? Explicit constructors in our code. What type of constructors? Parameterized constructors. So, and then what you can do? You can send new values for each instance now. How, sir? Watch. Come to class second. I'm going to change the code here. Public second int a. Now tell me, constructor is default or parameterized? Louder. So when I'm creating an instance, should I send a value or not? When I'm creating an instance, should I send a value or not? Yes, you need to send a value. See there, error there, see? Why error? Constructor call is not matching the constructor signature. You don't have a default constructor in the code. What you have is a parameterized constructor. So error coming. When you put your mouse there, is it telling you, say, There is no argument given for the corresponding required formal parameter A. Generally we define parameters now. Exact name is called, we call them as formal parameters. What we call? Formal parameters. So it is telling you, you did not supply any value to A now. So can I supply my values now? I am passing 100. I am passing 200. I am passing 300. See now guys, the value 100 first comes to A, right? Inside the code I am writing x is equals to A. And see the difference. Check. Did you notice the difference now? Are you having the same value or different values? Now you have 100 instances created with 100 different values. They are not going to be same. I hope you guys understood why to define a constructor explicitly in our code, even though we have implicit constructors now. So what I explained you now? What is the need of defining a constructor explicitly in our class, even if we can have implicit constructor. Even if we have implicit constructor. Is it clear? The answer for you is that only. What is it? Constructors are for initializing the fields. Implicit constructors have a drawback. What is the drawback? You will initialize fields of a class either with the default value of the type or a fixed given value, even if we create multiple instances of the class. I practically shown you. For class first, you created 3 instances. Under all the 3 instances, x value is 100 only. Next, to overcome the above drawback, we define constructors explicitly in our code. Okay? What type of constructors? Parameterized. And then send new values to the fields for each instance we create. What we do? We'll be sending new values for each instance we create. Now you understand, in the case of the class second, see there, I have 3 separate values. Okay now? Guys, what is A? A is a variable. A is a, what is X? Forget it. Field here. How many times I should remind you every time? Field. X is a is a, what is the scope of A? In the block. What is the scope of X? In the class, out of the class also. Watch it, you are accessing out of the class also now. Why? Because it is declared public. That's what I said you. Fields are accessible throughout the class. If you write public, accessible out of the class also. That's what I clearly showed you. See, accessible out of the class. Where you are accessing them? Test classes. Where you declared? Class first, class second. But you are accessible them for you in the test classes. Is it clearer? Okay? Now, just listen to me. Can a field and variable have the same name? Can a field and variable have the same name? Think here, think something, answer something. Don't sleep in the classroom. And yourself, you're sleeping in the classroom. Hello? You're sleeping in the classroom. Okay? So answer. Come on. Can a variable and field have the same name? Yes, you can have. A variable and a field can have the same name. But if they have the same name, don't we have a problem? No. Okay, both are having the same name. Both are having the same name. Now the confusion starts now. Sir, inside the constructor, if I say x, it is variable or field? There will be a confusion now. Inside the constructor, if I say console.writeLine, for example, console.writeLine x, it's variable or field? Variable. Why? A simple common sense here. First preference always goes to local. Understood my point? Then how to refer to the field, sir? You learnt in C language also. What I say yesterday only you will forget today. How can I just think like you remember something from C language? You learnt in C also, guys. What is that? this dot x. Go and see your C textbooks. You learned about that in C also. A field and if a global and a local variable have the same name, to refer to the global variables, we say this dot. When I say this dot, that refers to the global. That's nothing but the field. When I say x, reference goes to local. Are you clear? This refers to what? Local. This refers to global. Nothing but this refers to variable. This refers to field. Are you clearer, all of you? Now tell me, in this, when names are different, what did I write? X is equals to A. Correct? When names are same, what should I write now? If I say X here also, what should I write now? Just now I explained you. Louder. This dot X is equals to X. Are you clearer, guys? Tomorrow, why to give the same name, sir? Why confusion? You can give different names now. Yeah, I can give different names. But think one thing tomorrow. Tomorrow in your class, you have 10 fields. For all the 10 fields, you are passing the value through constructor. For all the 10 fields, you are passing the value through constructor. Through constructor only, you are passing value to all the 10 fields. If you give 10 different names here, it will be confusing, guys. If you give 10 different names to fields, 10 different names to variables, it will be confusing tomorrow. Which variable goes to which field will be confusing. You are required to remember 20 names now. If you use the same name, it will be clear. X goes to X, Y goes to Y, Z goes to Z. Understood my point or not? So then you are required to remember 10 names only. Otherwise you are required to remember this 10 plus that 10, 20 names. Which one is easy? Clearer or not? That is the reason why a variable name, a field name and a variable name under the constructor is in which we assign the value will always be same. If you give different name, no issue. But generally what do we follow? Same name only will give. When you give the same name, automatically the value will come to here. And to refer to the class, what we say? This dot and this is local by default. See now, you get the same output now also. Guys, if I don't write this, what will happen? Will I get any error? If I don't write this, what will happen? Will I get any error? Let's see. No error, guys. But what will value see? 0. So what happened? What happened, You're assigning the local variable x to itself now. You're assigning the local variable x to left hand side, right hand side, both are local only. You're assigning local to local. See, green lines are warnings. Red lines are errors. Errors won't run the code. But warnings will run the code. I already explained you in the command prompt only. I explained you the concept to you. When I put my mouse here, guys, have a look. Assignment made to same variable. Did you mean to assign something else? It is asking you, you are doing for the same only. Is your intention is to assign to something else? It is questioning you. Are you clear? Yes, I meant to assign to something else. How to say that? This dot x is equals to. Am I clear for all of you what is the need of defining a constructor explicitly in the code? Am I clear all of you what is the need of defining a constructor explicitly in your code? Understood my point? I'll tell you one more example. Why we define constructors explicitly in the code. See. Another example I'm telling you. Why constructors are defined explicitly in your code. This is one scenario. That is one scenario. Another scenario I'll tell you. See. This is scenario 1. And the scenario why we define the constructor. See. Generally, classes requires some values for initialization. Generally, classes require some values for initialization. For example, Generally, classes will be requiring some values for execution. For example, all of you, watch it. I'm going to have a class called as rectangle class. My class name is rectangle. Okay now? In this class, I'm going to declare two fields, double width and height. Rectangle has width and height now, double width and height. Afterwards, I want to write two methods, public, double, get area. So this method should get the area of the rectangle now. Okay, what is the code? Return width into height. Next, public, double, get perimeter. What is the perimeter of a rectangle, guys? Return 2 into width plus is a class, a simple class with two methods in it. Okay now? Now tell me guys, a rectangle has dimensions now? All rectangles are same, huh? Every rectangle has its own dimensions here. Understood my point or not? Every rectangle has its own dimensions. All rectangles are not going to have the same dimensions to you. Every rectangle will have different dimensions to you basically. So that's why generally what we do, when you're going to create the rectangle now, see, can I create this instance of the class now? Can I create the instance of this class now? You're creating the instance of the class here, but what are the dimensions of the rectangle? You should tell that. Are you clear? So in this scenario, what we do, we say public rectangle, again, double width, double height. See now, this dot width is equals to width, this dot height is equals to height. Did you understand the advantage of giving the same names now? You get a clarity. I'm passing a width, width goes to width. I'm passing a height, height goes to height. Are you clear? Now you define a constructor like this. Now see, when you are creating a rectangle class instance, now rectangle R1 is equals to new rectangle. And now you are going to tell the dimensions of your rectangle now. Are you clearer or not? Read this point again. The classes will require some values for initialization and execution, guys. Not only initialization, guys. Initialization and execution. For example, this is an example what I given to you. Now see, I want to create one more rectangle now. Rectangle R2 is equals to new rectangle. All rectangles are not same here. Different sizes, see. Now 2 points I come and see. What is it? First point. Default construct will initialize with default values. But I want to get my own values. And now, for execution of the rectangle class, get area, get perimeter should execute means there are values here, no values. Width is 0, height is 0. So what you'll get? 0 into 0, 0 you'll get. Again, return 2 into 0, 0 you'll get now. What is the use of getting zeros now? I want values. The values are passed. Are you clearer or not? Understood the second point? What is it here? What is that? Generally, classes will be requiring some values for initialization and execution. For example, and I shown you this code. So what is the conclusion? The values that are required for a class to initialize and execute are always sent through the constructor of that class. Through the constructor of that class. Is it clearer? Two scenarios I shown you. Scenario 1, scenario 2. Why constructors are defined explicitly. One more thing I'll tell you. One more point I'll tell you here. Third point also I'll tell you. What is that? defining parameters to a method will make that method dynamic. Remember the point? Defining parameters to a method will make that method dynamic. Yes or not? Defining parameters to a method will make that method dynamic. Which method? That method only. Okay? Whereas defining parameters to a constructor will make the whole class. That is the difference. What is it? Yeah, someone already asked this question. We can also pass parameters for methods also, na? Someone was asked, is my voice breaking? Guys, is my voice breaking? Padmavati, you have a problem with your internet. Just disconnect and connect again. Padmavati, disconnect and connect again. It's a problem from your side. Okay? Yeah, coming back. Already I said you, method parameters will make a method dynamic. Constructor parameters are going to make the class dynamic. What is this? Already someone raised this particular question on the top. What do you know? Sir, we can pass values to parameters also now. Why through constructors? See guys, if you pass values through methods here, to call the two methods, you're required to pass the values 2 times. One for get area, one for get perimeter. Am I right or not? Correct or not? But if I pass through constructor, I need to pass 1 time only. See, I passed for R1 here. Now tell me, R1 dot. Get area, R1 dot. Get perimeter. Both will make use of the values or not? If I pass it through method, once I should pass for get area and once I should pass for get perimeter. Which one is easier? Passing the two methods separately. Tomorrow if 10 are there, you should pass for 10 methods now. But if you pass through constructor, how many times I should pass? 1 time. Only 1 time. And all the methods in the class will make use of that particular values. Am I clear all of you? 3 reasons, 3 points I explained to you. Why I define constructors explicitly in the code without taking the help of implicit constructor. Because implicit constructor's drawback is they will initialize the fields with either default value of the type or a fixed given value. Okay? No, I don't want like this. I want my own values to it. So I define my own constructors to you then. Okay guys? See, I explained all these particular points here clearly. Why to define a constructor explicitly in our class when there are implicit constructor? First scenario. The first scenario what I explained to you. Okay? And this one, see the picture. 3 copies of class first, 100 only. 3 copies of class second, not 100 guys. 100, 200, 300 values are different. Okay na? So the values are completely different to you. And the second point and the third point. I give an explanation for all these particular things to you along with the code also, along with the appropriate code also. Any doubts with constructors for anyone? So with this we completed about 3 members of the class. Do anyone have any doubts about the constructors? 8-footer, open the mouth and answer. Do you have any doubts on the constructors? Online students also. So everything clear? So 3 members we clarified till now. First member is fields. What is the use of field? Field is to hold a value. Field is to hold a value. Method. Method is to perform action. Method is to perform a action. Constructor. Constructors are for initializing the fields. Every member has a different work to do in your code. Otherwise, why you want different members? We can have 1 member and do everything now. Every member has a different work to do. See, in a company, there are different types of the company. 4 managers are there. All the 4 managers will not do the same thing, guys. One will be a sales manager. One will be a HR manager. One will be a production manager. One will be marketing manager. Like this, we have different things now. All the 4 are not Same. Clear? So same way, in our class, how many types of members will be there? 8 members will be there. Every member has a different work to do. And till now, I explained about 3 members of a class. I'll explain the remaining 5 also. But 3 members I explained you. What are the 3? Fields for holding values, methods to perform actions, constructors to initialize the fields. So these are the things what you just require. Sorry, what I just explained. Okay? I'll talk about the other members also. But meanwhile, first I want to give a clarity about this. What's it about static, guys? From day one, we are writing main method static, but we are still not clear when to use static and when not to use static. I will clearly explain about static, and after explanation about the static, I'll explain you about a case study. How ATM machines work in the real time. Are you clear? So first let me give an explanation about static, and after that we'll study a case study, understanding how the ATM machines are going to work in the real time environment. Okay, we'll talk about both these things. So first let me complete the discussion about static. Okay, about static I'll clarify you first. Static. This is a keyword by using which we can declare a class or members of a class as static. Carefully listen, guys. This is a keyword by using which we can declare a class or members of a class as static. Example, for main you are putting static. So static becomes main becomes static method now. So before a variable, before a field or before a method or before a constructor, if you put static, that becomes static. If you put it before the class, your class also becomes static. Your class also becomes static to you. So if you want to make anything static, we prefix the static keyword here. Okay? Next. Members of a class. Members of a class are divided into 2 categories. What are the 2 categories? Static members. No, first, non-static members, also called as static members. 2 different categorizations. First one is non-static, second one is static. What's a non-static? By default, every member of a class is non-static only. By default, every member of a class is non-static only. And if we want a member to be static, we need to prefix